Pleasant to see so many people here from the public. It looks like we've got a subject that's of interest. Welcome you all here. And Nick, are you going to open up? Before we do, we'll start with the opening karakia.
Ki te mauri o te whenua, tue ki te mana o te tangata, tue ki te pono, te aroha, kia piki, kia eke, ki te taumata, ue taiki.
Thank you all. Vanessa, good to see you online there. I trust you can hear us. That's good. So Nick, you were going to start off.
Thank you, Worship and Councillors. Good to see you this afternoon. For the benefit of those who I haven't met, my name's Nick Carroll. I'm the Policy Manager at Taupō District Council. And I just wanted to note we've got Vanessa from the Department of Internal Affairs who's on today. Vanessa's the main event, so I'll shortly hand over to her. And then I'll sort of come in behind with, I guess, a few more comments about what the process around Head Start looks like for us as a council, and particularly our decision-making process. I just want to note that photo that I put up there. I studied history at university, and one of the things I love about history is how it has this habit of repeating. What's really notable about this point in time is that it has been close to 37 years since we've had major structural reform of the local government sector in New Zealand. That's a long time. Back in 1989, when we did have that reform take place, we went from about 850 units of government at the time, and they were mixed between boroughs and counties and boards. And they got amalgamated into about 86 multi-purpose new entities of local government. So this is certainly not a process that's new to the country, but it's one that we haven't done in a long time. And that's probably why it's causing a lot of angst out in the community across the country. So today, we're really going to get our heads around what the Head Start pathway is that the government's proposed. I want to talk a little bit about why we should be involved as a council, because this is a voluntary process for us. Then I'm going to set out what I think our decision-making pathway looks like as an organisation, working through to the 9th of August deadline. And then we're going to talk very briefly about what the sort of practicable scenarios might well be that we're going to investigate. It's probably really important to emphasise at this point that there are a lot of questions and we don't have answers to everything at this point. We've got a lot more conversation to have with other councils within our region and the surrounding regions. And we've got a lot of analysis that we need to do in relation to the very clear criteria that the government has set out for us looking at this. So probably without any further ado, I'll stop there, hand over to Vanessa, and then we'll come back to me.
Councillors, if I may, I just introduced Vanessa. So Vanessa Blakelock is a Partnership Director at DIA. Vanessa is kind of our Relationship Manager at DIA. So she works with us as a council not only on Head Start, but on a range of the government reforms that are coming in our direction. So, I just want to introduce Vanessa and to say thank you for her work in terms of supporting us not only through understanding and working through Head Start and understanding the implications of that, but the wider reform from government as well too. So just handing over to Vanessa.
Thank you, Julie and Nick and Mayor John. Thank you for having me today, and I'm only sorry that I can't be there in person. I'm at the northern end of the Waikato region today at Waikato Regional Council, and it's a real pleasure to be able to talk you through something about the reform but before you consider, how this might look for you in the other part of Nick's presentation. Thank you for putting up the slides so quickly. So I thought before we head into the actual Head Start, just have a little bit of a recap back on the next slide, please, around the original proposal as put forward by the government for simplifying local government, which was back in before Christmas last year when their proposals were first put out, and that was very much seeking views on the what was called a combined territories board type of approach under step 1 there, where it was proposed that mayors would form a board to lead regional issues and govern the regional council, and thereby taking over regional councils' roles, and councils were asked for views about that, and there were also, you might remember, options to involve Crown Commissioners. There was a step 2 under that proposal as put forward prior to Christmas, where boards would develop the regional reorganisation plan for how councils in the region would work together, and that was going to be done with public consultation and then approved by the Minister for Local Government. There were a large amount of public submissions on those proposals, and that closed off at the end of February. As it says on the slide, there were more than 1,100 submissions received, not only from councils, but also from public, from sector groups and iwi Māori, and there was a lot of fulsome consideration of those proposals. And cabinet decisions were made after that. It took a while longer than we anticipated, and I guess that is a sign of how robust those submissions were and how seriously that they were taken before the Head Start scenario was announced just a couple of weeks ago. If we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Head Start proposal looked somewhat different from the original that I've just covered. And that is really about this voluntary process we're calling the Head Start pathway. It's more of a streamlined options for those councils and in groupings that are ready to progress change now. And under that Head Start pathway is open to territorial authorities and current unitary authorities that want to come together to form those new unitary authorities. And rather than developing a regional reorganisation plan, the ask is that those councils submit an outline proposal by the 9th of August focused on structural change. And there's quite a bit, but there's a lot of flexibility in that. So the requirements are that the proposals can cover all or only part of a region and may include the formation of one or a small number of unitary authorities. Once those proposals have been submitted, officials will assess them against the criteria, which I'll talk about on the next slide in a moment. And then once that initial assessment has been done, officials will work with those councils on the detailed design of the proposal for further cabinet consideration in early 2027. And you'll note the bullet point on that last slide is a nod to the RM reforms, and it's noting that delivering the new planning system needs to be core business for all councils. So that's just the outline of the Head Start pathway. If we could move to the next slide, please. So we've talked about we talk about the criteria, and there are 5 broad criteria, apart from that first gate, which is that more than one existing unitary authority or territorial authority need to come together if they wish to submit a Head Start proposal. So once they're through that gate, there are these 5 criteria. And before I go through the slide, it's worth noting that there is no particular threshold for any one of these criteria. It is more about how the proposals look in the round once they are assessed. So the first one, deliverability, as it says on the can, that they're realistic, and the proposal can demonstrate how the new arrangements can be implemented. The second one, given what I've just said, it shouldn't be a surprise about the ability of the arrangements under the proposal being able to support the new planning system, and in particular progress on the spatial and natural environmental plans and their development, and avoiding disruption to that work. The third one, again, simplifying local government. It shouldn't be a proposal that contains any more complexity than currently exists in the system, and with that focus on regional governance. economies of scale, and this will differ region by region, depending on the makeup of the communities making up the configurations. So it's really about supporting that regional strategic planning and effective delivery of those key regional functions, and two of the key ones, of course, being transport and catchment management. And the other one is maintaining local voice. And it is up to the councils who submit to demonstrate that they're fair and effective representation for their communities of interests, and the balancing off of the urban, rural, and local interests. So that's as I said, there's no set threshold for any one of those criteria. We're saying that there will be a case of looking at all of the criteria, how they wash up for each proposal. Next slide, please. So there's been a term coined the backstop approach, and that is for those that do not councils that don't submit through the Head Start pathway, or they don't progress through the Head Start pathway. They'll be subject to the backstop process, which will be a compulsory process. And this will commence after the 2028 local government elections. And it is worth noting there that regional councillors will not be elected in 2028, even under the backstop proposal. And there are options there about how that might look under a backstop. At this stage, the indications are that there'd be a new interim body formed to govern regional councils and develop plans for that regional reorganisation I spoke about earlier. However, the specific membership of the interim body is still to be decided. It might look something like a board of mayors that we spoke about earlier about under the Combined Territories Board model, Crown Commissioners, or indeed a combination of both. The backstop model will be confirmed in 2027, and I'm afraid I can't give you any more guidance about what it might look like now, because it doesn't exist. And one of the other point worth noting there is that the feedback received through public submissions and submissions from councils for the Head Start process will help inform that backstop process. And the legislation for that backstop will go through before nominations open for the 2028 local government elections, for clarity and some certainty. Now, the next slide talks about the timeline there. I might just step through that quickly. So we opened. It's hard to believe that it was way back in May of this year when Head Start opened, and the deadline then is for the outline proposals to be submitted to DIA by the 9th of August, and Cabinet will decide in September which of the proposals to agree to, and it will agree to those in principle. And then between that decision and March next year, officials will be working with councils who have progressed to that next stage to go through some of the further detail. And I should mention that we anticipate that for those councils who do submit by that 9th of August deadline, there will be many questions that can't be resolved or fully developed between now and then. As we know, that it was originally 90 days and the clock is certainly ticking. But then that period from September through to March is the time to be doing that. And some of there are a number of issues that may not be able to be resolved fully. It might be the representation arrangements. It might be the finer details of how catchment management might work, or how iwi interests might be addressed, that type of thing. So that period from September to March is when that is designed to be worked through. Then the Cabinet is likely to meet again in May to look through the final policy decisions, confirm those proposals with a view to having the legislation introduced in the mid part of next year. And then the legislation needs to be enacted in advance of the 2028 local government elections, at which time you have the backstop proposals, the system will be starting to kick in. So look, that's the end of my part. My presentation is very much drier than Nick, so I will hand you back to Nick, and I'll be here for another hour or so for questions.
Before we do, Nick, can we just ask around the table, are there any questions of Vanessa? Duncan?
Oh yes, just wondering about this assessment of local voice. Will that include, I think it should be demonstrated, financial ring fences. For example, like a Turangi or a Taupō community board has delegated authority and spending responsibility for significant budgets. That's the question.
So that is something that we're really interested in hearing from you about, is how you, going forward, whether that is something that you would, so if you were to combine with, whichever councils, that whether that is something that you wish to preserve, and particularly if another council does or doesn't have community boards currently, and how you how you want to see that going forward in the future.
Yeah, I'm just wondering
So
if someone submitted something with no mention of financial thresholds, that would sounds fairly weak to me. I do have one other, but I do have one other question. It's been a burning question really, and I've heard murmurs of it, or maybe it's stated in there. Maybe I just didn't read the detail. But minimum population threshold, is there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I'm going to give a potentially unhelpful answer there. It's very much about, there will be plenty of views about what a minimum threshold should be, and I feel in some ways this is a little bit like the formation of water company kind of scenario playing out again. It's going to depend very much on the context of that on that community, and so it's not ever going to be just on the numbers of population. Some of it is about the geographical, how that's balanced off against the geographical distances and scale of the councils or the areas that have been brought together. So there's no one set answer. It'll be part of it, but it won't be the only answer.
No, thanks for that unhelpful answer. But just an observation about the backstop. It seems to me, well, I know the backstop hasn't been worked out, but it seems to me that you can't possibly wait till election 2028 to decide hey, who's left and who should we put together. But I would think that would have to really be decided at least a year before, as in a backstop solution. Hey, we're deciding A, B, and C councils are going to be together, and then sort of know a year before the election. Does that sound reasonable?
Maybe I potentially didn't explain it well when I answered, when I presented that part of it. So the backstop process will kick in after the 2028 local government election. So that will mean for those councils in backstop, the first time that they will strike it will be, in an election sense, will be the 2031 elections. So for councils and backstop, for territorial authorities, the status quo will prevail for the 2028 election, but new arrangements will be in place for the 2031.
Hang on a minute, Duncan. Duncan, all right. We're going to give everyone a bit of a go here. Nicola, Councillor Delator.
Oh, thank you, through the chair. Thanks, Vanessa, for your time and explanation. Just observation, your overview is very much Head Start pathways for those that are ready to go and happy to work together, which all sounds lovely. In reality, the messages we've heard is get yourself sorted or we'll get it done for you from central government. And the Head Start proposals can include other councils, even if they don't agree or want to be part of the proposal. So just, expressing comment observation that I'm hearing a bit of frustration and confusion from the community as well, which has resulted, just my question, I guess, on behalf of them, or what I'm hearing is a common sentiment that amalgamation is not required and that Taupō could stay independent. And I just wondered if you could comment on that so we can have clarity for the community, please.
Thank you, and thank you for, and through the chair, thank you for the question. I guess I can tell you about the to explain the policy, and which is certainly a government policy. And ministers can talk to you about what the government stated objectives are. What I can say is for communities is that, and for councils, is that they're being asked. It certainly is voluntary, but asked to look ahead to see what is in the best long-term interests of their communities and for their regions, and how that can be governed. And the financial sustainability is certainly one aspect of that. It's sort of being threaded through my answers a wee bit, but that is one of the things. It's about what does this look like for a community going forward.
Thank you,
and
Vanessa.
how can you best reach those objectives?
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Vanessa. Thank you so much for being the person who gets to answer all of our questions today. Apologies, I'd say we probably have quite a few. I have a number from myself and from community who have reached out to me. My first question is, what is the specific legislation that currently requires councils to amalgamate or reorganise, and where in the law is that requirement found?
So the current, through the chair, the current process for amalgamations is through the Local Government Act, and that requires a very robust process that involves the Local Government Commission. And you might have heard there is at least one currently underway. This process that we're talking about now steps outside of that, and this is government policy. And what it will do is that for those councils who wish to proceed into Head Start in the immediate term, there will need to be legislative change to the current Local Government Act and no doubt other acts to make that happen.
Councillor Woodward, you have another question? You missed out. We'll come back to you then. Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what sort of interactions would we see from DIA once we've lodged a proposal in August, and how quickly we would receive a response, knowing that we've then only got 6 months to get around and nail the fine print.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I might just start that answer with an answer about the medium term before leading up to the 9th of August. So as officials, we have been asked by the Minister of Local Government to work with councils who will be submitting Head Start proposals to have an early look at the proposals before the deadline, to make sure that there's no surprises once we hit that deadline, either surprises for you in that you know, at an informal level, we don't think as officials that it'll meet the requirements, and no surprises for us either, for ministers. So I'm saying that to give you an indication of how proactive we are going to need to be working with those that wish to submit. Certainly after the proposal submission and all through that period, I can anticipate that we will need to be working pretty constantly with you through that to refine, to check back, to make sure that we've fully understood what is being proposed, that any changes that we might recommend or that you might recommend are still within the spirit of intent and are going to work with your community. So I'd say it will be a fairly intense process from both sides.
Thank you for that. Councillor Campbell, followed by Councillor Leonard.
Yeah, look, thanks for that. I'm intrigued with that answer about the backstop, actually, because reading between the lines, it's reading between the lines, it sounds like any council, including this council, if they didn't want to be amalgamated until 2031 anyway, they could just have nothing to do with this Head Start process, kick back and just do nothing, and that would assuredly keep us independent until 2031, and you wouldn't just throw us in with some Waikato super regional council or something. That was kind of my presumption. Was that the backstop would be if we kick back and did nothing, we might just get thrown in somewhere for 2028 onwards. But you're saying that wouldn't happen. It would be from 2031 onwards. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh.
That throughout the process, so from 2028, the process will kick off, and it'll be firming up what is being done. And I guess what I would say is that there are a number of scenarios that might come out of that. You might be put in with preformed groupings. You might be put in with others that have sat in backstop, and you may not have the opportunity to determine those representation arrangements as for the way that you might necessarily want to. The narrative from ministers at this stage is that you will have less choice about how your arrangements might look. That might be about representation, it might be about all number of things. So in the Head Start, noting that it is voluntary, you have the opportunity to have a greater say in how that looks for your community on any number of measures from an earlier date.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Leonard, you have a question?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Mayor John. I'd just like to express my disappointment that Councillor Campbell was allowed to ask...
Councillor Leonard, can you speak into your microphone a bit louder and a bit clearer? We can't hear you.
I am speaking. I'm frustrated, John, that Duncan's had a second turn when I didn't even get a first turn.
Councillor Leonard, can you please put your question to us?
My question is what is the example out of the super city in Auckland that shows that a smaller population has had good democracy representation? Are we looking to have community boards that are just going to be more layers of bureaucracy, and this is actually going to end up costing our community more? Could you please highlight where you've seen success, because it's certainly not something I've seen?
Thank you, Councillor Leonard, for the question. I have to admit, it's putting me on the spot a wee bit, and I'm struggling a little bit to draw something. I do live in Auckland. I have some time, so I do have the knowledge, but I'm just struggling a little bit. What I would say, what I'm thinking is that community boards are certainly one option that could be put forward. They're not the only option about how you might like to have that, the model going forward. It's certainly through the Head Start pathway, it's an opportunity for councils to put forward how they see it going, and that is certainly one option. I guess the Auckland example is challenging in that some of the populations of those local boards, as many of you know, are somewhat larger than district councils, and I think probably well known that some of the delegations to the local boards could be improved, and that might be something that if you wanted to go down a local board or a community board or a regional, sub-regional board, or however you wanted to make that look, that the delegations, both in terms of funding and decision-making powers, are things that you could possibly look at. I've had a conversation with another grouping, sub-regional grouping, elsewhere today around what that might look like, that you could form it up so you could be able to do things like have targeted rates for particular areas. You could have the potential, for example, to do bylaws for specific sub-regional groupings to better account for those communities of interest and how you might best support them.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Cameron.
But the new the new mega council is going to have the overall say at the end of the day, isn't it? We can put in whatever we want as a bylaw, but there's nothing to stop them unwinding that. My supplementary question to that is, what then happens to our community assets? For example, we have the TEL fund in Taupō, which is getting close towards $100 million. Does that just get absorbed by the neighbour, whoever takes us over?
Thank you for that question. That's certainly something that is asked about often in terms of not that particular fund, but also, but in terms of assets. So again, those are things that you can seek to have protected. They're, ring-fenced for the benefit of certain communities. That has certainly been something that's happened in the Auckland model with some of the trust, the electricity trust funding, the dividend payment. They're only to people who are in certain geographic areas of the Auckland region. But to your earlier comment, Councillor, around the bylaw being unwound, you have the delegation set up in a way that empowers that community, that is where the decision is made, at that board or whatever the term, the mechanism is, that you would have that protected so it couldn't be unwound. And again, looking at how you might cast the representation, there's no reason that it needs to be the Auckland model where currently the local boards have a chair, voted from amongst them. That chair is not on the governing body. There's no reason that needs to be the model going forward. For example, a potential model might be that you'd have a chair of a board, sub-regionally, that is a member of that governing body, so that you would have that representation at that more local level and at the higher level from that one.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Cameron.
So then why wouldn't we just
Councillor Cameron, would you like to
they
repeat
are?
your question? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question that's come up during the consultation process we've just undertaken, and I have a question for myself. The question that's come from the public is, why are we not looking at a model of shared services, shared infrastructure, that sort of thing, as a standalone council rather than full amalgamation? If you wouldn't mind answering that one first, and then I'll have my question to follow.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that question, through the Mayor. And I know that is something that many of the council chief executives have been looking at, is shared services and economies and efficiencies that can be realised through doing that very valuable work. All I would say in answer to that is this is government policy that they would like to see the reorganisation through the creation of unitary authorities for scale.
Thank you for that answer, and I do hope the member of the public that asked that is listening. So my question is, the government's initial intentions with this did make sense, that there are smaller councils that do need to amalgamate to continue to exist. I don't disagree that amalgamation is a good idea. We've got a lot of councils throughout a country of 5 million, but I've got to ask, does the government have a plan anyway? I mean, they've suggested this Head Start process before. They have said, do it yourselves or we will do it for you. So if they already have some semblance of a plan, wouldn't it make sense for us all to go through that plan and perhaps inform that? I'm just concerned that one of the measures is that we have to demonstrate that we can still meet all our requirements under the additional reforms that are coming through local government. And quite frankly, I don't see how we can, because in order for us to meet these timelines, we're sidelining other very important work, like the long-term plan. We're supposed to be working towards rate caps. These outcomes seem a little bit more important at this stage. So I'm asking why it is that the government's taking such a speedy approach to this when best outcomes probably will take a long time. And we might get to the end of this and it's very, very messy, because some councils will want to work together, some won't. And we've got an election A new government could be sworn in January and we're back to the drawing board. What a waste of everybody's time and money. So is there a semblance of a plan?
No, the plan for backstop is that's as much detail as there is that I've given you now. But perhaps if I talk about Head Start and the time frame, which is clearly very short, but is designed to be looking forward to that 2028 election, and that is why there's that, this shorter term indication for those that are ready and want to go now and to scale up. That is why we've got this nearer term 9 August deadline, but looking forward to working through all of that detail between now and the 2028 election. But that the longer term, the backstop is designed for those that either don't progress or don't submit. And as I said, the detail, there is no further detail. Part of the idea is that those who submit through the Head Start will generate ideas for how that is going to look for those backstop, the backstop. And as I say these words, I understand, and officials understand that is frustrating for councils and for communities where it's difficult to weigh up whether you should go through Head Start or backstop when you don't know the detail of backstop. But that is partly why Head Start is designed for those that can reach agreement with their neighbouring councils that they wish to scale up now and determine their own, how this is going to look across the councils that might make up any particular grouping and how it'll look for their communities.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Woodward.
Hi, Vanessa. Back to my original question that I asked you earlier, which was around the specific legislation. So the answer that you gave me sort of didn't quite answer the question, in my opinion. And I'd just like to ask again the exact. So you're saying that there needs to be legislation done in the future, and that's in that timeline. But if there's no current legislation, then how are we being pushed to do this?
Thank you for asking again. So I should thank you for the opportunity to clarify. So the current legislation under which councils are established in New Zealand is under the Local Government Act, and the provisions around how you might go amalgamate under the current settings in the Act, and as I said, that involves a local government commission process. Changes, there will be legislative changes needed for council groupings that go through under Head Start, and that legislation will be drafted at the start of next year. Once all the decisions have been made about how that needs to look. So that will be drafted at the start of next year, and that will make changes to, that legislation will make changes to the Local Government Act. For example, just one tiny example of what that might look like is, who can strike a rate and how you might strike it. There might also be changes to, just reflecting back on the question received earlier, which I didn't answer fully, around long-term plans, for example, and all of the requirements that currently need to be looking at. The Minister for Local Government has indicated that there could be changes for Head Start councils, or Head Start regions, let's call it that there might be changes in the Local Government Act to account for what a long-term plan timeframe needs to look like, or what auditing requirements there might be. There might need to be some transitional provisions to get the councils across the line to be able to do all the other things that you need to do. For example, the planning reform and all the current requirements to smooth that pathway while the new entities are stood up and the new voting arrangements for representatives are put in place.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Woodward, you have a supplementary question?
Not a supplementary, but I have another.
Councillor Foreman.
I'm just trying to get a bit of clarity on if we are named in a proposal that wasn't ours and that gets accepted, ours doesn't, will that proposal then be paused for us to come on board and get involved with the planning, or will we have to wait to 2031 to join it through the backstop?
Thank you for that question through the chair. I would imagine one of the first things that will be happening if you are named in a proposal that you are not a party to, whether or not you have submitted a proposal yourself, one of the first things that officials will be doing will be getting on the phone to your chief executive and mayor and making contact to understand what that might look like, what's been happening. So it won't be you. I don't know how it's going to play out, but we will be in contact immediately. With the detail of how those are going to look, if this scenario plays out, we haven't worked through, but partly that's because we're not hearing yet where the council groupings will be submitting on that basis, and seeking to bring other councils that aren't keen to be in along the journey with them. So that's partly one of the many reasons why the minister has asked for us to be engaging with councils who are going to be putting head starts in, to have a look at the proposals, to see what they look like, and to start working with you on some feedback on those.
Councillor Foreman, you have a supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary to that, I guess. Then, so the no surprises goes both ways, and we don't really know if we will be treated as a backstop or part of the Head Start program if it's not our proposal. So
but
no
you
clarity.
You will know either way. You won't need to. You'll know the decision, the cabinet decision about what is happening with each of those proposals early on, and by early I mean the current indications are that will be September when that decision's made. So that will be, I guess, the first gate about whether it's proceeding or not, and if it's not, then we would start to have the conversation about, do you wish to join? There wouldn't be, I cannot imagine that as officials or, the government would be wanting you to be in a state of limbo about not knowing. We'd be having those conversations very early on about what the outcomes, about, different gates that you might go through at that September point, September 2026.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Vanessa. My question is around consultation. So one could argue this is front and centre of our significance and engagement policy, given we're looking at the reorganisation or extinction of our council. If we were successful with whatever proposal goes forward initially, clearly between now and August we have not got enough time to meaningfully engage and consult our community, many of whom are in the public gallery here today. What is the expectation of officials and of the government that in the period after that, that we're able to consult meaningfully, and how tightly will we be wedded to any Head Start proposal?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Thank you, John. I think that, part of undoubtedly this is first thing to say again is that undoubtedly this is a short time frame for you to engage, with your communities with that a meaningful consultation before you submit those proposals, and your councillors are amongst a number that have made very real and genuine efforts to, gauge what the community community's views are on, which way you might go, whether you should submit and all those things. And so there is an expectation that to do more meaningful consultation will be between that September decision and next year. And one of the reasons for that is to know whether the decision has been that you would go forward and on what sort of parameters that we would have worked through with you, so that you can more meaningfully go out and do that. And so one of the things that we're going to have to work carefully with you on is at what point do you go out pre or post, any decisions to make changes as a result of the further work that's been done around whether it's financial sustainability or the ring fencing or the representation arrangements, whether you go for a community board or whatever other mechanism that you choose to do. We'd really want to make sure that we weren't making changes that were of material difference for the community that you hadn't consulted on. So clearly that time frame is also going to be tight, bearing in mind the Christmas period, but we would be trying to support you as far as we possibly can, understanding that until the legislation has changed, the current settings around public engagement hold, and also what your significance and engagement policies look like. So again, I'm not sure that that's a particularly helpful answer.
No, but thank you for that, Vanessa. Councillor Murge.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, just kind of off the back of what Councillor Taylor has said, the actual policy documents that the government has released, in those documents and in those statements, they have identified that councils are not going to have sufficient time to meaningfully engage with their communities before submitting the initial outline proposal. And I think where all councils are coming from is that we don't want to engage meaningfully with our communities after we've already submitted the initial proposal, because the community is supposed to inform that from the start. So it's really putting us in a tight position. But that wasn't my question. My question was actually around the detail of the backstop process that you've mentioned. I want to know whereabouts in the Head Start policy document and in the guidance documents and in all of the documents on the DIA website does it state that backstop wouldn't kick in until after the 2031 local elections, because I have not seen that anywhere. And the fact that you've mentioned it today, I think it took me as a surprise. It obviously took Councillor Campbell as a surprise, because that timeline, that 2031 timeline, is not found in any of those policy documents, and I feel like that would be a key piece of information that all councils should have had outlined within those policy documents. So if it is in them, can you please point us to where it says that? Because as far as I'm concerned, you've also said that the detail of the backstop process is to be determined. So I'm wondering then, how would you know that the backstop wouldn't kick in until after 2031 local body elections?
Thank you. And at this point, I'm scrambling to find the actual reference, which I'm having trouble. Having trouble finding. I can undertake to send that information to Julie as your CE, but also just to reiterate, it'll take effect as at the 2031 elections. But I understand the difficulty of not being able to find it, and I do apologise for that. But I will get that information with some more clarity through to Julie for dissemination to you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Mananui.
Thanks, Vanessa, for us answering our questions today. I'm going to try and frame up a question from some feedback out there in the community. Just given the short time frame we have here for Head Start proposals, and coming from us sitting here in our little fishbowl on an island in the middle of the North Island, surrounded by many. In the scheme of time frames of where we're sitting right now, that being having a workshop, a presentation from DIA. We were out and about in the community last week. Alongside what you're seeing out there with other TAs, what's your view on where we're sitting right here, right now, with our planning organisation and work we're doing with the Head Start proposal? Are we a million miles behind everyone else, as was kind of what I was alluding to?
Sure. Thank you. There's a whole lot of different progress, the pace of progress around the country is really variable. And for regions where, the current regions where there's a smaller number of councils, in some ways they are further ahead because there's a smaller number of territorial authorities, for example. So it's less complex. And, for example, I work with your council colleagues in Northland, and I guess one observation I'd make from there is that, you've only got the 3 territorial authorities, and they've got a geographic, natural geographic boundary. That they have nobody to the north or the east or the west of the north, and because Auckland is very much out of scope of this, that there's a natural barrier to any other configurations. I guess my observation with your council is that you, as you've noted, Councillor, with your location, which I can see that you have different options available to you, and that means that, if you wish to proceed, and there's a whole lot of complexity that brings you. And so I'd certainly say that I'm just saying those things to give you some context, but that the fact that you're here, that we're able to have this conversation, that your mayor and CE are certainly very seen as very active and wanting to engage with us and with neighbours to understand different scenarios and what that might look for communities. I think it appears, certainly at an official level, like that you're progressing well. The key is, to which extent you're able to make decisions for your community quickly, and in a way that works with your neighbours, either through a Head Start process or for longer term, what that might look like under the as yet to be defined backstop.
Cool. So I think I'm hearing it's a little more complex here for us in the middle of the island, and that because everybody, when you present this, they want the solution straight away. So I think we're probably a couple of weeks away from having those offerings, but given the complexities we have versus others, we're probably not doing too bad, I think, is what I'll take.
That was my intention. I think you've summarised that well.
Hope you're next. We'll have to.
Thank you. I do feel for you, Vanessa, being in the hot seat today. And I mean, just these questions aren't personally towards you. I just want to say you're doing a great job. My question is, I've kind of got 2 questions in one. Firstly, just given this represents one of the largest changes to local democracy in a very long time, why is there no requirement for a binding public vote before these decisions are made? And did I hear just before that you said that when the legislation changes, there's going to be legislative change on the way that we do consult the public?
Shall I take can I take the last one first?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to. I don't know. I didn't mean to say that. I think I was more talking about the current legislation and the requirements under the current legislation won't change between now and when the legislation is changed in 2027, 2028.
So consultation will continue to happen and be vital and at the forefront of this whole process?
I wouldn't. I'm not saying that it's at the forefront, but the current legislative requirements for consultation won't be changing until the legislation is changed. And at this point, that won't be changing until it won't be fully enacted until likely the start of 2028.
Right. So there still will be change to the consultation and to how we consult.
It's not clear. Some of that depends on what you put forward. If you were to go on Head Start, what you put forward on that and what you need in order to make it happen.
Thank you. It was. She was answering the first part of my question, John.
Which was this, and what was the first
Councillor
part?
Campbell.
Well, yeah, I just have one question, but I will make one speculation though. Based on what you said today, I will speculate that any councils out there who don't want to amalgamate will hang on for the backstop and pray, say that governments will change and things could change, and they might not have to be stuck with someone else by 2031. That's my speculation anyway. But my question is, Māori wards. Say if we amalgamated with a district which had Māori wards, but Taupō doesn't have Māori wards, my presumption would be that because there was all that fluff about voting for them, my presumption would be that those districts with Māori wards would keep them, and those without wouldn't. So you might have a unitary council with Māori wards in part of the district. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And my initial answer to that would be that's absolutely how it might well go. And that is, again, is something that needs to be, if you go through Head Start, that needs to be spelt out and highlighted in the outline proposal, that's what you want to see, so that and it's honouring the the stance, if you like, of each council, both for those that have said that they want to retain their Māori ward, and for those that haven't, that is something that would carry forward into a new unitary authority, if that's what each of the parties wanted.
Councillor Mertz, followed by Councillor Cameron.
Thanks, Vanessa. Just kind of picking up off what Councillor Woodward was talking about around councils being made to work towards what is not legislation right now, but what is effectively going to be legislation. What is legislation right now is the Local Government Act 2002, and at the moment that is the current legislation in place that all local councils are governed by, and under that legislation is the SCP, the Special Consultative Procedure, where we're actually required to consult with our communities on significant changes. And the fact that this government has identified within its policy documents that we don't have enough time to do that is putting councils at a real, it's exposing us to a lot of risk here. So I just wanted to note that, but I think one of the questions for me, and it might be my final question, is around one of the five things that councils are going to be weighted against in their proposals, and one of them is that we need to be able to demonstrate that we are maintaining local voice if we're to amalgamate under a new unitary authority. So my question there is, I don't know if you'd be able to help answer it, is how are smaller scale councils supposed to demonstrate fair and effective representation for communities of interest if they emerge with larger scale councils? Like, do you guys have any actual examples of what tools or mechanisms that councils could use to, demonstrate that within the eligibility criteria, or are we kind of just being set up to, are we just being set up to try and attempt to have a swing at something that's impossible?
Yeah.
And that is, I guess, one of the fundamental questions for communities is how they will be represented, and and recognising that the larger the configuration of a unitary that Taupō might go into, it will be more challenging, but that is something that you, under the Head Start proposal, the pathway, that's something where you have more you could potentially have more influence in putting forward how that represent, the proportionality of how many representatives from your current district might be on that governing body, so that you do actually have that local voice. That you have the opportunity to shape whether the next layer down, if you like, with whether it's a community board or what the model is, that you make sure that you are able to effectively represent your communities. And there are certainly lots of live conversations around the country at the moment about how councils want to do that, and I know that is something that LGNZ are looking at the moment, to work through what local voice might look like, so that you are not lost and that your communities do have a say through your representation.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks again, Vanessa, for answering these questions. I know you're sort of the messenger here, but I think it's the uncertainty of the backstop process that makes the Head Start process feel like something we really need to do to best position our district. And that's reflected in some of the questions that I've had from members of the public. And I've got one here. If the Taupō District Council sit on our hands and wait, it seems as though we will then have to accept whatever we are told to do, no explanation, and therefore understanding of what that might be. Would we have an opportunity after 2028 to then decide to put a proposal forward at that stage? And if so, why the rush? First question.
Thank you for that. Under this proposal that I've explained to you, we've been given, there's no indication that there will be that opportunity. It will be, you'll be told what to do and how to do it, essentially.
So do it ourselves or have it done to us doesn't sound very voluntary. My next question, is the government aware that this work is impacting quite a lot of really significant work that's going on within the council at the government's direction? We've got some significant reform across 3 waters. We've got rates caps implications. We've got replacement RMA, plus our business as usual. Does the government have any concept of the cost and resource pressures that they're putting on councils with all of this work all at once? We're trying to keep efficiencies here, but quite frankly, this is what's costing ratepayers money.
I would say that your mayor and your CE have been active in that space about letting ministers know the pressures that this is putting on them and the council as a whole, and for those reasons that you've spoken about, that there is a lot of reform going on, and that brings its own pressure alongside BAU, and officials are letting ministers know about that.
Thank you, Vanessa. We certainly are well aware of that and trying our best to cope with it. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just get my question from earlier answered, and
I'm
then
sorry
I
if
can
I
ask
cut you
my
off prematurely.
second one? Thank you. So again, just given this represents one of the largest changes to local democracy in a long time, why hasn't there been a requirement for a binding vote from the public?
First thing to say is it is undoubtedly a huge change, and I think Nick's slide at the start of this session really captured that really well. I don't know why the government have chosen to make this decision. What we do know is that ministers have said that they've been approached by councils that have wanted to amalgamate in the past, but that the process that is currently in the Act is very onerous and doesn't lend itself well to making progress, and that these timeframes are a way of bringing that about. They want to see less complexity in the way that local government is governed, and this is being very clear that this is a step forward in that direction.
Thank you. I think it's very disappointing. It's giving more dictatorship than democracy, in my personal opinion. Has the government already modelled the benefits it does expect to receive, or is it asking councils to redesign local government first and prove the benefits afterwards? Everything that we've heard so far today sounds like a whole lot of mess that's being dumped on us for us to then unfold and work out. I feel like we're looking for a light switch in the dark with blindfolds on.
There hasn't been any detailed modelling done, and through that next stage, after the Head Start proposals have been submitted, that's some of the work that we would be doing with the councils that would make up each of the Head Start groupings to see what the benefits look like.
Councillor Woodward will go to Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, so knowing that mergers and amalgamations cost, you're looking for efficiencies, well, the government's looking for efficiencies. Has there been any discussion on when those efficiencies need to be realised, or is it just by 2028 you need to show you are being more efficient?
Yeah, thank you for that question. There's been no time frame put on that. I think there is a understanding that the transition takes time, and that it really the focus will be on getting arrangements stood up in time for that 2028 election, and then the detail will be worked through after that.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. Councillor Cameron.
I wonder if I could help with the answer to that, because we've got a working model in the Auckland Super City. Have they realised efficiencies of scale, and are the rates cheaper there?
I wouldn't want to speak for Auckland Council, but I would say that they have documented that they have had the benefits of scale, and that they've had there's a lot of views about rates and relative to the services that Auckland has received relative to the rates are generally described as stacking up pretty well against around the country as to what else happens.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Vanessa. Given the timelines are really tight, the other item which is going to be of interest to everyone is how much this is going to cost. And is there any indication that the government are going to put their hand in their pocket and fund some of these changes? Now, we've just been through a major waters review nationally, and Waikato Waters, I note, has its launch today in Cambridge. That comes at significant cost. This is going to be significantly higher. Is the government's expectation ratepayers will pay for the changes that are going to cost a fortune, or are they going to dip their hand in their pocket and help fund this?
Thank you. And it's timely that you would, raise that in relation to water. I was party to a discussion between some of the Waikato Waters mayors earlier today with the minister, where the costs were raised, both both for what was incurred for the water transition and as a flag for that was likely to be, you know, as you say, greater under this scenario. The Minister indicated that the government has not provided for funding for those costs, noting that there were some costs that were met by the government for water, but that for the Simplifying Local Government, they are interested in having conversations with councils who do go through the Head Start pathway, who are progressed following the September discussion to see what that might look like, potentially a sharing of costs. But that's not something that's been identified now, but they are open to those discussions going forward.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Campbell.
Oh, look, while we're on the subject, I will put a somewhat of a plug for bigger can be better. I mean, I'm from Auckland originally. I mean, I'm not a great fan of the super city, but I've become aware of some of the things they really do better than smaller places like this. And something I've just been recently aware of, for example, is, and this is what I see as a deficiency in our council and other small provincial councils actually, is, like, for example, up in Auckland they have something called a value for money committee, where they actually have, it's been going for about 5 years, where they actually have elected members taking deep dives into staff operations and saving money, believe it or not. And their aspiration for this year is something like 80 million. They're aiming for $80 million in savings. And I think our little council has not had that approach for way too long, and that's why rates are much higher than they should be.
I'm just not sure, Councillor Campbell, is it a statement you're helping Vanessa with, or you?
That's my statement.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Vanessa, given the consistent messaging in this is about cost savings and efficiencies, can you clearly say whether ratepayers will pay less or more under the restructure? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's a great question.
But this is why we're doing it, right?
We're all ratepayers, and I think we'd all want to be hearing yes. I guess, and for particularly for communities who are looking at this and wondering how this is going to look for them, I can completely understand why you're asking the question. And again, it will very much depend on what as a grouping you put forward. If that is your part of your driver that you want to see that, then how you configure it, what your priorities are for the operation of the council, where you might want to be, investing further or cutting back. That's all going to determine, what the rates look like, and particularly for councils who are struggling with a whole lot of debt, what that looks like going forward. So I'm really saying, I think it's kind of in your hands about how you put it forward in any Head Start outline proposal.
Thank you. Has anybody else can I follow a second question?
Microphone's on in front of you,
Yep.
Councillor.
Thank you. And just going on from that then, so how will existing council debts, loans, building leases be treated when the merge does happen?
I remember just a reflection. I remember we had these conversations with councils very much in the formation of local water done well, and the ability to ring fence certain assets or debt for a period of time, and that could be something that you wish to do, in the way that we were talking about trusts and funding, that you might wish to see that happen. But I guess if you're coming together as a unitary over time, the income and the debt is something that is ultimately going to need to be shared, but you, again, through your Head Start pathway outline proposal, you might decide that that is something that's so important that it is protected for a certain period of time, that, you know, you've got certain conditions on how you would work with your neighbours as you go forward.
Thank you, Vanessa. How are you off for time? I realise you've got other commitments.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mayor John. I have another 5 minutes.
I know you've got your mic on. Is there anyone else I'm missing?
Yeah, Your Worship, I have a question.
Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, it's actually another question from the public as it happens. Vanessa, if you were a councillor in your region, would you accept this proposal in its current form? And, you know, understanding that if you do nothing, you'll have to accept the future while not knowing either what that future would look like or how much it would cost.
There are many reasons why I haven't stood to be an elected member, and this question is one of them. I think you've got an amazingly difficult job to do.
Thank you for answering that. I'm sure the member of the public is probably very grateful for that. I certainly am.
Councillor
Yeah,
Woodward,
I think it's a tricky situation, that you are looking both for your current community and what's in the best interest of the communities going forward, and how you can best shape what that looks like, and, you know, either in the opportunity of Head Start or not. And I think that is not easy.
Thank you for that answer.
Last one.
Councillor Woodward, you've got time for one more question.
Thank you, Chair. This is my last question statement. For me personally, so I am the ward councillor of a smaller rural community in our district, and for our community, we have very much struggled with representation already. So this whole idea is very concerning to my communities who are already struggling with their representation. I just wanted to make that statement, but my question in there is there a point in us doing our long-term plan, and are we negatively affecting our long-term plan by pushing it back so that we can get through this proposal?
The current requirements on you to, you know, complete your long-term plan within, you know, the current settings remains. That is undoubtedly challenging, and if you go, as I said, if you go through Head Start, you know, there is potential for the requirements to be eased in some sort of transition way, you know, going through to the 2028 election and beyond. And yeah, how you navigate that, undoubtedly that's a real challenge. And, you know, we'll be talking to Julie as your Chief Executive and others to help guide that through this uncertainty, because it certainly, we understand it is very challenging.
Thank you, Vanessa, for giving us the time today. I, for one, do appreciate that you're giving us the opportunity to design our own plan. There's obviously a lot of questions. It's the uncertainty that most people are worried about. But I for one, do appreciate that we can put to you in our outline proposal what we would like to do, and then refine it afterwards. So I'd like to thank you for being brave enough to step into the ring here with us, and appreciate the contribution you've made.
Thank you, Mayor John, and thank you all for your forbearance on, you know, on some pretty, these are really big issues for you in the community. And, you know, part of the, you know, my role is to support you in that decision making, coming to grips with the information. And I know that there is a lot of information out there. I will come back through Julie on that 2031 timeframe. And also to say that I will be, you know, continuing to maintain, along with my colleagues who are working on the policy, maintaining a close contact with Mayor John and with Julie. And so we don't, this is not the only conversation that we'd be having with you, that we're keen to keep working with you and understand where you might be heading. So thank you again for having me today.
Thank you, Vanessa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you too.
Nick Carroll?
Right, fortunately Vanessa's filled up almost all the time, so there's not going to be too much for me, which is great. Look, before this workshop we pre-circulated a briefing note, which I think has had around about 8 pages of detail for you. We will make sure that's available on the website, so the community can see that as well. And we'll make sure this presentation is also publicly available. Vanessa's covered off a bit of what I had in the slides, so I might just whip through them reasonably fast and just highlight a couple of key points as we go through. I'm conscious that Vanessa talked about unitary authorities, which is maybe a term that's not that commonly known, particularly amongst our public. Essentially, we've got 2 tiers of local government. We've got territorial authorities like ourselves, so city and district councils, and our job's mostly about delivering the services on the ground, things like water and roading and parks and libraries. And then we've got regional councils who operate at a much larger scale, and they are largely focused around sort of environmental management, public transport, and sort of strategic planning right across the region. So they've got a big focus on integration. One of the key things that they do is look at catchment management, which tends to cross the boundaries that we have between city and district councils. So they've got a real integration focus. A unitary authority brings all those functions together into one entity. So that's essentially what the government's talking about creating across the country, going from 2 tiers with city and districts and then regionals, and smushing them all together, as a technical term, to create these unitary authorities. And that's how they're going to really reduce down the number of local government units that we have. Obviously, we talked about Head Start and Backstop. I think the lack of uncertainty said it all. What is really clear, I think, from the policy document and the guidance document that's followed it, is that the Head Start process is set up for councils who are ready to go. And through a number of public engagements, the ministers have talked about the likes of Northland, West Coast, they've talked about Southland, places where the councils have been talking about amalgamation possibilities for literally years, if not decades. The reality is the Waikato's in a very different place, and while there have been some of those conversations, we're certainly not at the start line like a lot of those other councils. And that, I think, as you've highlighted through your questioning, poses some real challenges. Vanessa talked a lot about the government's objectives. 2 I wanted to just highlight was delivering the planning system. There are real challenges in that delivering the planning system is going to have to take place over 27-28 in terms of regional spatial plans. And that's exactly the time that the government's talking about these new entities coming into some sort of form through new legislation. So there are real tensions there. And then the last point there is around quick wins. And this again comes through the policy document. The government's certainly in a place leading up to an election where there is an impetus to show progress on reform, and I think that's one of the reasons why there's certainly an emphasis in the Head Start on those who are ready to go, who are united in what they're trying to achieve. Vanessa already talked about how assessment will take place, so we won't dwell on that. And that was the timeline that she put up. The one point I did want to emphasise was that 6-month period, probably 5-month period, between October and March when a final proposal has to be put in. The guidance document that DIA has produced is excellent. It's really good in setting out what they're looking for. What I read into that is that there's the opportunity to leave things unresolved as you head into your first submission of your outline proposal on the 9th of August. They're not expecting all the answers on the 9th of August. However, they certainly want to see all those answers put in place by the time you're submitting your final proposal in March 2027. So in that 5-month window between your initial proposal and then submitting your final proposal, there is a mountain of work to be done. And I think as we move forward in terms of your decision-making process, you just need to bear in mind that while our eyes are on the 9th of August, if you decide to push on, the March 2027 deadline poses significant challenges for the organisation.
So Nick, sorry to interrupt, but that's
Yes.
why we've got you here. Councillor Woodward, you have a question?
Yes, I did. Was from one of those earlier slides. Sorry.
Do you want me to zip back and see if it triggers a thought?
Trigger my memory. Yes, please. Back one more. It was around the Head Start thing. So I just wonder, Nick, if you could please perhaps explain a little bit more in depth for public understanding that we are not in the same position as many other councils, and why we're not. Just for context for the public, so they are coming along this journey with us.
Yeah, I think around the country there have been all sorts of conversations which have been going on for many years between councils. Some of those are driven by pure geography. So you look at somewhere like Tauranga City and Western Bay of Plenty District Council. They've got shared labour markets, shared housing markets, shared infrastructure. So in situations like that, it's made sense for those councils to talk about how do they work better together. You've got other situations where you've got councils who are under real financial stress and they've needed to talk to each other to see how they could create more financial resilience if they combine going forward. We've not had those same pressures in our environment. We've been financially robust. We've got a certain scale which has enabled us to deliver the services that our community needs. We've not had those same pressures, and that's probably why we're not in the same place that the likes of Northland or West Coast are.
Can I just add, Nick, though, that we belong to two collaborative entities across the Bay of Plenty and the Waikato, and so, for example, we get our insurance through BOPLAS, which gives us greater buying power, so I just don't want to think that we don't share services or look at opportunities for efficiencies, but we haven't had the same drivers for amalgamation as perhaps other places. So,
yeah.
Sorry, Nick, apologies.
Thank you. No. So you've heard that. Sorry, Councillor.
That can you go back to the Unitarian Territorial Authority slide, mate? So when you look at the regional council piece and how it's been proposed, you can kind of see what central government's trying to do. Reduce duplication. They've certainly made it clear in the guidance, with a nod back to Mari May talking about catchments. That kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. But when you start to add more than one territorial authority in and amongst that, I don't know whether there's examples you can give us of sort of, from a Taupō perspective, and whoever our new neighbour might be, how does that sort of present itself for our current town and district? Like, we make an assumption that Taupō District Council will be no more. Is that what we assume? Depending on who we decide to party with, we can either be the big brother in the room or the little brother. But is that correct in thinking that under that example there, literally there'll be no more TDC and we will have to be combined, or does it mean you can operate a TA within the new unitary?
There will be no more city and district councils. You will only have unitary authorities. And likewise, Taupō District Council will what am I trying to say? I don't think it's a case of necessarily big councils coming along and gobbling up little councils. I think the reality, and this is what happened back in 1989, is that you get whole new entities being formed. And perhaps this is part of the challenge in the public arena and the political arena, is some of the fear that comes with being gobbled up by a bigger player. I don't think that's the reality. I think the reality is that you'll create a whole new organisation that will be completely reshaped with its own new culture and dynamics and systems. One of the challenges, though, that you've talked about today in terms of your questioning is around that voice. And as your units of government get bigger, it can become more challenging for the local voice at a small community level to be heard. And I think that's the real trade-off that the sector is really grappling with. As we move towards the government's desired outcome, which is less units of local government at a larger scale, which the assumption seems to be that will deliver greater efficiencies, the trade-off for achieving those greater efficiencies is less community input at a local representative level into the decision making around how money is spent, basically. That's the tension.
Councillor Cameron, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nick, but isn't it true that the government has indicated that population is going to dictate the representation around the eventual decision-making table? So if we partner with a district council that has a population that's double ours, they will effectively have double the representation around the decision-making table?
I actually don't think it's that clear. Under the current arrangements, when we're doing a representation review, population is a significant driver for how we divide up representation. What I'm picking up from the policy document and the guidance is a clear signal from government that it's up to us to design what new representation would look like. Now, it may well be that once they see those proposals and they actually have to formulate legislation, they decide to become a bit more dictatorial in terms of what that arrangement must look like. But at the moment, on the face of it, the policy documents seem to give you or give the local government sector a lot more flexibility to design a new representation framework.
That's interesting. Supplementary, if that's okay, Your Worship. Because our population doesn't actually represent the number of rating units we've got. We've got a lot of houses where nobody lives there, where it's a holiday home, and that puts us at a disadvantage when it's population based. So we could use rating units potentially, or attempt to use rating units to make it a bit fairer. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I think that this is the joy of the government's Head Start proposal. You've got the opportunity to sit down with your neighbours and talk about how would you shape things up like this. I guess the challenge is everyone's looking to represent their own communities to the best ability that they possibly can. And that creates tension.
Design your own unitary authority, isn't it? That's what Vanessa was telling us.
Yeah. This is a voluntary process, but I believe there are some reasons why we want to be involved. And the first of those is to understand what good looks like for us, for our community going forward. Regardless of whether we put in a Head Start proposal on the 9th of August, or we end up in some sort of backstop proposal, regardless, we want to have an idea about what good looks like for our community. Do we want to be advocating for a single big council for the Waikato? Do we want to be advocating for joining with somebody else in particular? Until we do the work and understand the trade-offs, we're not going to be able to know what to actually advocate for. Secondly, I think it makes sense to be involved to actually understand what others are doing. Any decisions that we make are influenced by others, and likewise, their decisions influence us. It's important that we stay in contact with others and understand where they're heading and what's motivating them. And then lastly, there's been certainly some rhetoric from the government in terms of their policy document, making assertions that the backstop process will be compulsory and it will be done to you. I think what we've seen through the Three Waters process, what we've seen through the Head Start process, is that the government has created opportunities for councils to have some sort of influence in what the outcomes may be. Now, it may be that when we get into the backstop process, that influence becomes more limited, but at least if we've done the thinking up front around what we're trying to achieve, we may be able to take advantage of any opportunities to influence what backstop looks like.
Thanks for that, Nick. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. It happened again. I've almost forgotten my question. I need to write them down as soon as I think of them.
That's right. We can come back to you. We can go to Councillor Campbell.
I think I'll just try and answer as best I can Councillor Cameron's question about representation and questionability. I think a mini example, it all depends on ring-fenced decision making and financial responsibility, actually. For example, as I see here, we've got little places like Mangakino and Turangi, but they don't have ring-fenced decision making and budgets, so we all around this table here decide what happens in Turangi and Mangakino. We are not practicing representative democracy very well here. In this place here, that doesn't mean a bigger place like, say, we were tied up with Hamilton, provided we get a little, maybe it's only one councillor from Taupō district, but so long as we get ring-fenced delegated decision making and budgets, it could be better than it does here at this table. That's what I think.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Woodward.
So just going back to what you were saying about, I think it was on the previous slide with number 1, need to understand what would be best for us. It just triggered a light bulb in my head. So when we did the representative group survey, sort of over the end of the year, we did ask community in that survey what sort of means the most to them, I think the question was, or what is most important to them in their communities. And I wonder if even using that information for this, because I think that's what we really need to understand, is what is important to each individual community that we've got across our district as well, because all of our little communities have very different needs and can be quite diverse. So understanding that, and if we look back in that survey, it was talking about like our core services and that, which is what's most important to these communities. So I just think that's a potential. But also at the start there, I just wanted to make that comment that you said this voluntary process, and then if we don't decide, then we're going to get told what to do. I think that central government calling it a voluntary process is incredibly toxic and narcissistic of them.
Thank you, Hope. Councillor Greenslade, are you there with your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Been listening with fascination. I want to ask Nick some questions that bring it home to the local level as the councillor for the Turangi region. Nick, can you go into a little bit of depth, please, because I don't really understand how we're going to have conversations with other councils and things that really matter to my district, such as transport and the water levels in the lake, which are affecting the erosion and so forth at present, are going to be discussed and resolved if we're only talking to other councils?
Well, I think the whole Head Start process is about councils talking to each other around where there are logical amalgamation options and how the division of functions, both at a territorial and a regional council, could definitely be delivered more effectively through some sort of unitary structure. So that's why councils will talk. I'm not sure
I mean, I hear what you're saying. If you look at the map, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute this is a possibility, but if you look at the map, you will see the greatest area of border for us is actually the Ruapehu District Council. So if, for instance, we decided to go with the Ruapehu District Council, they're in a completely different regional area at the moment. So I'm just really struggling to get my head around how on earth anybody can have these conversations. I mean, think transport, for instance, something like that. I mean, yeah, I think I'm very sorry to say that the more I listen, the more confused I become.
Look, I don't think you're alone by any stretch. The assessment process against the 5 criteria that the government has set is going to be challenging because first of all, there's no hierarchy. What there is, in essence, is a bunch of trade-offs. One of the objectives of the government is around the delivery of the new planning system. Now, delivering the new planning system becomes a lot simpler if we stuck to the Waikato region as an example, given that we'll be generating a regional spatial plan with other councils in the Waikato region. So that might be a lot simpler. However, financial sustainability might be better if we went with a council in a different region. Or we might find it easier to create more local voice if we went with another couple of councils in a different direction. So there are going to be trade-offs, and one of the things that we're going to do for you is do that analysis and bring it back to you as a bunch of options. And I've put up the decision-making process there. On the 30th of June, our intention is to come back in another workshop setting and lay out our options assessment, which will balance all of those different objectives that the government's got and show you, hopefully, what those different trade-offs will be. And then you will be able to make some decisions going forward. But importantly, as part of that, we also want to bring to you the feedback that we get from the community and from the engagement that we're having with iwi groups and with other stakeholders in the community. So you've got a more fulsome picture to understand how this kind of comes together. So don't totally understand how it could be confusing. There are a lot of different variables in play, and I don't think you should find that disheartening, because you just simply have not had the chance to have the information in front of you to better understand it at this point.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that if you've already got relationships in place with other councils, and obviously Waikato is the obvious one, then pursuing those is probably sensible to begin with. But I appreciate you can't comment on that, but that sounds like a sensible. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Greenslade. We do need to move on because we're running over scheduled time, but who's next out of Councillor Woodward or Councillor Campbell?
Oh.
You can go, whatever it doesn't.
Ladies first. There you go.
Thank you. Just a quick one. Consultation with the community. Will that happen again? And sorry if it has been said already today. Will that happen? So that won't happen again before the 9th of August, but it'll happen again before the September proposal, or is it next year? Sorry.
No.
May.
So on the 9th of August we submit, and then Cabinet makes decisions in September, and then we've got this window through till March 2027 to sort out all the detail.
Okay.
And in that 5-month window, there is the opportunity to have further engagement with the community.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, well, respectively, I say the survey we put out, the survey that staff put out last week does not lay out options, very legible options that I can see. I think it's very open-ended, and proceeding on the basis of those responses, well, yeah, that'll be interesting. But I'm just into that timeline, 30th of June, update at the council workshop, as in the implication of that is that's when we're going to receive information on all the options and sort of we'll be discussing which direction to proceed. But I mean that's literally about 5 weeks before that submission has to be submitted before 9th of August, and I'm just estimating that other councils will have their ducks lined up before that, or at least heavily involved in serious discussions.
Could you just go over that again?
Yeah. So essentially we're now into June, and we're in a place where we're having conversations with the community and iwi and stakeholders, and we're collecting information. Not only in terms of what other councils are doing, but also where are we at as an organisation and where do we want to go. By the 30th of June, we want to come back to you in a workshop setting and lay out an options assessment that's probably going to be sort of roughly 80% done. There will be some holes that we still need to fill at that point. The point of bringing you something that's about 80% is so that you can clarify for us whether we're kind of heading in the right direction, or whether there's more information that you want to know to help your decision making. We're expecting you to make a decision on the 21st of July at a special council meeting, where hopefully at that stage you've got all the information in front of you that you need. And that decision will be around, one, whether you want to make a submission, bearing in mind you've got to have a partner, at least one, to do that. So that decision might be taken out of your hands. And if you are going to make a proposal, then what's the shape of that proposal? What are the key elements to it? That does put a lot of pressure on to then prepare the actual submission itself I think it's about 3 weeks after that. But that's the time frame that we've been given by the government. So that's the tightest we feel that we can make the process and still deliver you information to be able to make a sensible decision.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Woodward.
And sorry, just so the meeting, the workshop on the 30th of June, we will have the survey results at that meeting?
Yes.
Will we have them before that meeting, or maybe a week before?
Yeah,
or
no, I'm looking at
take us a bit of
Hadley.
time to...
Yeah, look, through the chair, I guess it closes on the 17th. We'll work as quickly as we can to get the data processed into you. I can't give any guarantees today, but certainly we'll try our best to have it to you in advance.
Thank you. And will that be available to the public, these survey results as well?
Yep. That'll be a public workshop, and look, we'll do our best to circulate in advance everything that we can, because we know that when you turn up here and you've had a chance to read, it makes the discussion and the debate a lot better.
Councillor Cameron.
Oh.
If I may, at the next workshop, one of the things, and it might be the inappropriate time to raise this, and I'm sorry if it is, but I would like to look at the ways in which we are going to ring fence assets for our communities, such as the TEL fund, if it's a community trust, so that we can, that must go back into our community, and any other funds that we're holding with future plans in mind, housing and property funds, that sort of thing. I'd like to look into the ability to ring fence that if we can, to protect that.
Councillor Campbell.
if I may, can we just answer that question because that work's already underway?
Yeah. Through the chair, we have engaged Simpsons Gresson to have a look at that for us and propose what the best methodology to do that in light of Head Start proposals. Obviously, Jonathan Salter's raised some risks as far as government coming and legislating over that, but we will bring that advice back to you.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that's underway.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, there's just a question about the public submissions. What is being done to vet the public submissions that we know these people making the submissions either live or work in the district and aren't just coming from Timbuktu or Auckland or whoever?
Well, hopefully there will be people from Auckland commenting, because a lot of them have houses here.
Oh yes, ratepayers, yes. But what's to stop people? What's to stop a bunch of people from Hamilton who have nothing to do with this district at all, plugging into our public survey saying they'd love to be stuck with Hamilton?
So perhaps if I'll answer that, there's two parts to my answer, which I think I've actually emailed you already. First part is the survey actually has a section to ask where people are from. So I think if that's where you're asking about in terms of where people are
so relying on honesty,
from.
okay. Yep.
And secondly, the Local Government Act doesn't prevent people from other parts of the region from actually submitting to our proposals. So when you put your long-term plan out, it doesn't constrain the submission process to just the residents or ratepayers or those already in the region. You don't have that ability.
Are you saying we don't have that? We're not allowed to vet that, or even.
So the Local Government Act asks you to consider the views and preferences of the community. It doesn't say that you have to live in the community or be a ratepayer from this district to be able to submit to something.
No, what I'm saying, it would be nice for us to know as the decision makers, to know where these submissions are coming from, whether they're allowed to submit or not. If we get 10,000 submissions from people in Hamilton about what they want us to do, it would be nice to at least be able to segregate that and say, hey, this is what these people over here from Hamilton think.
Which is why the survey's got a section on that, Councillor Campbell.
Provided they're honest, yes. Yeah, okay. I get it.
If we've got 10,000, no, I won't go there. Any other questions before we close? Oh, Nick, sorry.
Just a couple more. Basically, there are four options or four scenarios that we're going to be investigating. The first is a single unitary across the whole of the Waikato region. The second is some sort of subset of that. So they call it a sub-regional Waikato unitary authority. What the government has signalled pretty clearly through their guidance document is they expect no more than 2 or 3 across the Waikato. And then we'll be looking at options around amalgamating with councils in a different region other than the Waikato. And then the fourth option, which will always be before you, is the opportunity to simply bypass the Head Start process and keep preparing for any sort of backstop process. That's right. Look, we'll skip over those. Suffice to say that there are risks involved in this process. We've touched on the risks of other councils putting in a proposal and naming us when we don't necessarily want to support that. We've got risks around relationship management. We're a pretty collaborative sector most of the time, and we want to make sure that we're conducting ourselves in a way that is continuing to foster those good working relationships going forward. Probably the key mitigations in terms of those risks are around, one, making sure we're talking to others and listening to others. And then secondly, making sure we're really clear in our own understanding about what's important to us and our community going forward. And then that will help us shape what is the best sort of option for us going forward. Look, and then last slide from me, in terms of next steps, you've got links to a whole lot of information in that briefing note. The DIA's website is pretty good in terms of background information, and there's a link there. Obviously, the engagement is underway in a number of various forms. We're already starting to do the assessment work, and the next sort of key milestone is that 30th of June workshop with you.
Thank you, Nick.
That's me. Thank you.
I appreciate the effort you put into this. The public have asked the maps. They are available or will be available online?
So we've got I've got a couple of maps. The first one on the left in the green shows just the Waikato region with the major urban centres. And then the one on the right shows a couple of different catchments. You'll see the blue Waikato-Waipa River catchment sort of dominates the region, but it's important to think about catchments when we're also considering the delivery of regional council services, particularly catchment management. And then this map as well just shows you the location of the different territorial authorities. So there's the city and district councils, with us smack dab in the middle of the kaleidoscope.
Thanks, Nick. Council Foreman.
Yeah, if you could go back to that other one, just want to note that catchment, those catchment areas are what's noted in documents rather than the actual flow of the water.
Right.
Yeah?
Yes, Councillor. Yes, for example, the upper catchment of the Taupō lake is in the Ruapehu district. So, yeah, agreed.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Once again, thanks to all the public for being here and participating. There's about 30 of you here, which is appreciated. Can we have the closing karakia, please? You
Ke wātea e ronga, ke wātea e raro, aro ki te teka, aro ki te pai, hui e taiki e.
Thank you very much. Any of the public want to ask any of the council